And I made my mind up that I was done with this. So I took my program seriously. Got out of that. One out of 100 people have a chance at recovering and never using again. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, or graham crackers. Hey folks, Chuck Campbell here. Born Larry Charles Campbell, June 28th, 1967. Boy, this is tough. This is shooting from the hip, Tom. I mean,
it's all right.
Dude, hope
you
got
get
a
the most realistic stuff.
Good editor.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. Don't remember much about the 60s or the early 70s from being a kid. I had a good life growing up. My parents, my dad worked, which at that time you could have a one-income family. Grew up on the farm here, which my brother and me own now. Have one brother, Billy, William. All my dad drank. He drank. He was a construction worker, same as I was. He drank. He was in jail, prison. Probably a really good chance. They say alcoholism isn't hereditary, but I firmly believe that it is. I do, because I heard all the stories of how, like when Dad was in Vietnam, when they come home from Vietnam, before Vietnam, and it was the Wild West everywhere. The entire world was the Wild West, and my dad drank clean up till the day he died. He'd slowed down a lot. He died of cancer, and but I remember that was one of the last things he wanted was a bottle of beer. Yep. My mother, she was always a stay-at-home mom, and she drank. She drank excessively at points. My dad did too. Got to the age of about 13 or 14 years old, and for a kid, a child, I shouldn't say a kid's a baby goat. And I learned that lesson through a program that really helped me a lot. It also, unfortunately, took me from my family for a couple years. And I just want to help anybody that's having trouble with a chemical or alcohol addiction or any other addiction, because an addiction is an addiction. It don't matter what, whether it's chemical, physical, it's an addiction. At the age of 13, 14, I started drinking a little bit, and discovered that I liked it a lot. Never dabbled in drugs too much. Went from pretty much top honor student in my class to if I pass, I pass. Didn't care. Liked to drink, liked to party. Girls come along about then. And I fell right into the trap that just almost every teenage boy is gonna, with partying and girls and stuff. Fortunately for most people, they can lead a normal life, and I couldn't. Got my first underage drink when I was 15. Got another when I was 16. Got away with a dozen in between times. Got my first DUI as 19 years old. Back then it was a slap on the wrist. Got through that. Wasn't too long, I got a couple more. Had to do 30 days in work release, which I might as well stayed home. There was no programs back then to help anybody. It wasn't, society didn't think it was a great big deal back then. I did kind of straighten up there for a while. But there again, and I've always worked, guys. You can't depend on mom and dad all the time. That's the way we was raised in. Back around, it must have been 92 or 93. I had a couple of those DUIs hanging over my head. Got another one. And I left the state of Pennsylvania for all of about 13 days till they caught up with me. And then they weren't fooling. They put me in state prison that time. Well, in the late 90s, I had, by the late 90s, I had lost 3 very important men in my life, which was my grandfather, my great uncle, and my dad. When Dad passed, that crushed me. Almost destroyed me. And I can't sit here and blame Dad's passing fully for destroying me, because it was my choice to drink. That's the reason that I always gave for drinking. That was my dad passing away. Made it into the 2000s, the early 2000s. Got me a couple more DUIs. Got through all that. Just dumb luck. And got done with all probation and everything. In the mid-2000s, I'm going to say about 2005, I met a very important lady to me. Laura. I had quit for almost 2 years. And I just couldn't stay quit. So I went to state prison for a couple more years. I'm not proud of that, but it's part of my life, and it was the most changing factor that there was. I grew up in the church and went every Sunday clean till the alcohol started at 13, 14, 15 years old. Always had a belief in God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, everything, but it kind of got set to the side. And in the early 2000s, it started coming back out. I started talking to God more. I started, praying more, but more or less praying for stuff that I wanted, so I could do things my way and not His way. And it don't work. Trust me, it don't work. Lace come along, Laura and me was living together, and they sent me to prison. That was hard, being away from my family for a couple of years. Come home from prison.
It'd be 2012.
Bound and determined to get my life together. Wasn't allowed to stay in my own house because of my actions. I lived in a shack in distant PA. A friend of mine through the Alcoholics Anonymous let me live there. I lived on a couch. It smelled like a wet dog. I had a toilet. I had a shower. And I had a coffee pot. I remodeled the upstairs of this place for the fella, for him letting me stay there. I lived there for 50 weeks by myself. People were taking bets that I would drink. I had the perfect opportunity. Nobody bothered me. I could have drank, chose not to. Probably one of the wisest decisions I ever made in my life. It was somewhere. Well, I can tell you when it was. It was in March. Very beginning of March of the following year. I'd been there almost a year. My mother passed away. Everybody bet old Chuck go drinking. I didn't. Through God's power and Christ's power, I didn't have to drink anymore. I could let it alone. For the first time in my life, I was in control of my destiny. As far as alcohol was concerned. Everything else, God's got control of that. I'll own up the booze. He's still in control. There's no doubt about that. My life has gotten so tremendously much better since I've been able to break the bonds of alcohol and drug addiction. I never was into drugs too much, but alcohol, and it's still a drug. There's a lot of other stuff that happened in my life, folks, that I used to use those for reasons to drink. I called them my resentment shelf. To where if I was mad at somebody, I had a mason jar on there, because I grew up on a farm. Mason jar, what do you think of? There's that resentment. So and so beat me out of $5, never paid me back. And I could get that resentment down, pop the top off my jar, let that resentment out, and that's the only reason I needed to drink. There was other ones that was even dumber. It's raining, it's snowing, it's not raining, it's not snowing. I made excuses for my actions. And if I can help one person out there, that would be the most tremendous benefit that I could ever have in my life. To help other people with alcohol and drug addiction. I can never be a counselor. Been what's called a little too harsh for that job. Okay. November 11th, 2017, Laura agreed to be my wife. And we got married. Pastor Tom married us at church. She agreed to become my wife, and now we can live the rest of our lives together as man and wife and not have that blanket of shroud of sin, living in sin or whatever, over top of us. In today's modern society, that's more acceptable, but it still isn't right. It's not right in the eyes of the Lord. It's not right in the church. Well, my relationship started when I was a child. Attended Sunday school regularly. You got to when your grandma's Sunday school teacher. Or you take an ear beating in the afternoon at dinner. But I used God in my life when I was younger, in my late teens, early 20s, as my crutch. To where, boy, if something didn't go right, I'm barking on God's ear, asking favors and forgiveness. Way wrong attitude to have. But that's how things were. And that's how my story is. Later on, you know, I come to depend on God later on. I learned different aspects of prayer. The biggest thing that happened to me, the clincher, the deal, was when I was laying in that cell, 4 foot by 8 foot. That's a sheet of plywood. That was how big my room was at Western Penitentiary. And I got down on the floor on my knees and I begged God to take the desire of alcohol away from me. That was in October of 2012, and I have not had a desire to drink since then. So that'll be 6 years this fall. And my relationship with God has grown tremendously when that desire was lifted.